The room went silent the second my name was called. Not the normal kind of silence. The kind that feels heavy. Suffocating. Like the air itself is waiting for something bad to happen. Ethan. My office. Now. My boss didn't even look at me when he said it. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew. I could feel their eyes on me as I stood up. Some curious. Some uncomfortable. And a few, already enjoying what they thought was about to happen. My hands were slightly shaking. Not out of fear. No, not exactly. It was that gut feeling, the one that tells you something is about to change your life forever. I walked toward his office slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. And when I reached the door, I paused. For just a second. Because deep down, I already knew. This wasn't just a meeting. This was the end of something. Or maybe the beginning of something much worse. Come in, his voice snapped from inside. I opened the door. And the moment I stepped in, I knew I was right. He wasn't alone. HR was there. That fake, polite smile plastered on her face. A folder in her hands. Of course. Classic. Sit down, Ethan, my boss said casually, leaning back in his chair like this was just another normal day. Like he wasn't about to destroy mine. I sat. Slowly. Carefully. Trying to keep my face neutral. But inside? My mind was racing. What did I miss? What went wrong? Because just yesterday, everything was fine. Or at least, I thought it was. We'll keep this short, he said, tapping his pen against the desk. Your performance has been disappointing. Disappointing. That word hit harder than it should have. Because it wasn't true. Not even close. I was the one staying late every night. Fixing problems no one else could. Carrying projects that should have failed. And he knew that. But I stayed quiet. Because something about the way he was speaking. It wasn't about performance. This was something else. Something planned. HR slid the folder toward me. Termination papers. Just like that. No warning. No discussion. Nothing. You're being let go, effective immediately. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And that's when I saw it. That tiny smirk. Barely there. But enough. Enough to tell me everything. This wasn't business. This was personal. Can I ask why? I said calmly. Too calmly. Because inside, something was starting to burn. He leaned forward slightly. Lowered his voice. Asking questions won't change the outcome. There it was. Control. He wasn't just firing me. He was enjoying it. Security will escort you out, HR added softly. Like she was doing me a favor. And then. It happened. The moment I'll never forget. Actually. My boss said, standing up. Let's do this properly. My chest tightened. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. He opened the office door. And suddenly, every eye in the entire office was on me again. Everyone, he said loudly, clapping his hands once. Quick announcement. My heart dropped. No. No way he's doing this. But he was. This is Ethan, he continued, gesturing toward me like I was some kind of example. Unfortunately, not everyone here meets the standards we expect. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others looked down. But no one said anything. No one stopped him. He's being let go today, he finished, his tone almost amused. And then he looked at me. Right in the eyes. Let this be a lesson. That was it. That was the moment. The exact second something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. No shouting. No scene. Just silence. Cold, controlled silence. Because in that moment, I understood something. He didn't just fire me. He humiliated me. In front of everyone. On purpose. And the worst part? He thought this was the end of my story. I signed the papers. Without a word. And as I walked out of that office, past every single person who just watched it happen, I made a decision. A quiet one. But permanent. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight him here. I wasn't going to give him the reaction he wanted. No. I was going to do something much worse. I was going to disappear. And then, I was going to come back. Stronger. Smarter. Untouchable. And when I did, I wouldn't just take my revenge. I would take everything. Including his company. And he wouldn't even see it coming. The elevator doors closed. And just like that, I was no longer Ethan, the senior analyst everyone relied on. I was unemployed. Disposable. Forgotten. At least, that's what they thought. The ride down felt longer than usual. Too quiet. Too still. I could still hear his voice echoing in my head. Let this be a lesson. I clenched my jaw. Not out of anger anymore. No. Anger is loud. What I felt now was quiet. Sharp. Focused. By the time the elevator reached the ground floor, I wasn't thinking about what I lost. I was thinking about what didn't make sense. Because something was off. Very off. You don't just fire your top performer overnight. You don't humiliate someone publicly unless you want to send a message. Or you're hiding something. I stepped outside the building. The sunlight hit my face, but it didn't feel warm. It felt distant. Like I was already disconnected from the life I had just been kicked out of. My phone buzzed. A message. From Daniel. Bro, what the hell just happened? I stared at the screen for a second. Daniel. The only person in that office who actually had a spine. The only one who looked shocked, not entertained. I typed back. Not here. Call me later. 3 dots appeared instantly. Then disappeared. He understood. Good. Because if I was right, this wasn't just about me. That night, I didn't sleep. Not even for a minute. I sat in my apartment, lights off, laptop open. Replaying everything. Every project. Every email. Every late night fix I did for the company. And then, I found it. A file. Buried deep. Something I had worked on 2 months ago. A financial restructuring model. At the time, it didn't seem strange. Just another urgent task my boss pushed onto me. But now, looking at it again, my stomach tightened. Because the numbers didn't add up. They weren't just wrong. They were manipulated. I leaned closer to the screen. Scrolling slowly. Carefully. Line by line. And then I saw it. A pattern. Funds being moved. Through shell vendors. Fake contracts. Inflated expenses. My heart started pounding. Not from fear. From realization. This wasn't bad management. This was fraud. And suddenly, everything made sense. Why I was fired. Why it was so sudden. Why it was so public. I wasn't a liability because I was bad at my job. I was a liability because I knew too much. Even if I didn't realize it at the time. I leaned back in my chair. Exhaled slowly. So that's your game? I whispered. He wasn't just arrogant. He was desperate. And desperate people? They make mistakes. Big ones. The next morning. My phone rang. Daniel. I answered immediately. What's going on? He asked, his voice low. You need to be careful, I said. Silence. What do you mean? I hesitated for a second. Not because I doubted him. But because once I said this, there was no going back. They're cooking the books. Dead silence. You're joking, he finally said. I wish I was. I could hear him breathing heavier now. Processing. Thinking. They fired you because of that? He asked. Not because I knew, I replied. Because I could know. Another pause. Then. Ethan, this is serious. I know. What are you gonna do? That question. Simple. But everything depended on the answer. I stood up. Walked to the window. Looked out at the city. The same city where, just yesterday, I had a career. A reputation. A future. And now, I had nothing. Nothing. Except the truth. I'm going to destroy him, I said quietly. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Ethan, he started carefully, you're talking about taking down the company. No, I corrected. I'm talking about taking it from him. For the next few weeks. I disappeared. No social media. No job applications. No contact with anyone except Daniel. To everyone else. I was just another guy who got fired and faded away. But behind the scenes? I was building something. Piece by piece. Plan by plan. Because revenge like this, it doesn't come from anger. It comes from patience. And I was very, very patient. Step 1? Information. I needed proof. Not suspicion. Not guesses. Proof. And Daniel. He became my eyes inside. At first, he was hesitant. Nervous. Scared. And honestly, he had every reason to be. But once he started seeing the same things I did, the strange transactions, the last-minute adjustments, the pressure from management to not ask questions, that hesitation turned into something else. Anger. Ethan, it's worse than you think, he said one night. How bad? I asked. They're moving money out faster now. My eyes narrowed. Why? I don't know, but it feels like they're rushing. I smiled slightly. They are. What? They're covering their tracks. And that meant one thing. They knew something was coming. They just didn't know what. Or who. Step 2? Money. Because taking revenge is one thing. But taking control? That requires power. And power requires capital. I opened my laptop again. Stared at something I hadn't touched in years. An old account. Something I started as a side project. Something no one at the company ever took seriously. Including him. Especially him. I remembered the day he laughed at it. Called it a waste of time. Said I should focus on real work. That memory made me smile. Because that waste of time was about to become his worst nightmare. 3 months passed. Then 4. Then 5. And slowly, Quietly. Everything started falling into place. The company's stock? Dropping. Investors? Getting nervous. Internal pressure? Rising. And my boss? He was getting sloppy. Making bigger moves. Riskier decisions. Exactly what I needed. Because the higher he climbed trying to fix things, the harder he would fall. Then one night, Daniel called again. But this time, his voice was different. Tense. Urgent. "Ethan, it's happening." I stood up instantly. "What is?" "They're preparing for a major audit." My heart skipped. "Perfect. They don't know we have proof, but they're scared," he continued. "Good," I said. "Let them be." Because fear? Fear makes people blind. And blind people miss what's right in front of them. I closed my laptop slowly. Took a deep breath. And for the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel something. Not anger. Not pain. But anticipation. Because after everything, after the humiliation, after the silence, after the waiting, the moment was finally coming. The moment where everything changes. Not just for me, but for him. Because in just a few weeks, I wouldn't just be back. I would be above him. And when that happens, I wouldn't need to say a word. He would understand. Exactly. What he created. 6 months. That's how long it took. 6 months of silence, planning, watching from the shadows. While he stood at the top, thinking he had already won. Thinking I was gone. Forgotten. Irrelevant. But the truth? I was closer than he could ever imagine. It started quietly. No announcements. No headlines. Just numbers. Small movements at first. Tiny shifts in ownership that no one paid attention to. Because that's how you do it. When you don't want anyone to notice. You don't make noise. You move, silently. Strategically. And most importantly, patiently. My laptop screen glowed in the darkroom. Graphs. Stock movements. Ownership percentages. All of it carefully tracked. Every single share I bought was a step closer. Not just to revenge, but to control. Because I wasn't here to expose him. Not yet. No. That would be too easy. Too fast. Too clean. I wanted something else. Something deeper. I wanted him to feel it. The loss. The confusion. The slow realization that everything he built was slipping through his fingers. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Ethan, this is insane," Daniel said over the phone. His voice was a mix of disbelief and fear. "You're actually doing it." "I told you I would," I replied calmly. "You're buying shares in the company, quietly, through different accounts?" "Not just accounts," I said. "Entities." Silence. "You mean shell companies?" he whispered. I smiled slightly. "Let's just say I learned from the best. Because if there was one thing my former boss taught me, it was how to hide things. How to move money. How to operate without being seen. The only difference? I wasn't doing it to steal. I was doing it to take back what was mine. The company was already weak. The falling stock made it easier. Cheaper. Investors were nervous. Some were even desperate. And desperate people? They sell. Quickly. Cheaply. Without asking too many questions. Exactly what I needed. Week by week, my position grew. 5%. 7%. 10%. Still invisible. Still under the radar. Because no single entity held too much. It was all fragmented. Controlled. Hidden. Until the right moment. Meanwhile, inside the company, things were getting worse. Daniel kept feeding me information. Late-night calls. Encrypted messages. Everything we needed. "They're panicking now," he said one evening. "How bad?" I asked. "They're cutting departments, delaying payments, even senior staff are starting to question things." I nodded slowly. Good. Pressure creates cracks. And cracks eventually break everything. But the real turning point came when the audit began. External investigators. Independent. Unbiased. And most importantly, thorough. That's when the fear inside the company turned into something else. Chaos. Because once outsiders start digging, secrets don't stay hidden for long. I watched it all unfold from a distance. News articles starting to appear. Rumors spreading. Investors pulling out. The company's value dropping even faster. And all the while, I kept buying. Quietly. Relentlessly. Then one night, Daniel called again. But this time, he didn't even say hello. "Ethan, they found something." I sat up straight. "What?" "I don't know the details yet, but management is freaking out. Your boss hasn't left his office all day." A slow smile spread across my face. There it is. The beginning of the end. Because once one piece is exposed, the rest follows. Like dominoes. One after another. Until everything collapses. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because exposing him? That wasn't enough. I didn't just want him to fall. I wanted to be the one standing at the top when he did. So I made my move. The biggest one yet. I consolidated everything. All the hidden shares. All the fragmented ownership. Pulled together. Into one entity. One name. One identity. And when the numbers updated on my screen, I stared at it for a long moment. Not because I didn't believe it. But because, after everything, after the humiliation, after the sleepless nights, after the months of silence, it was finally real. I owned 51% of the company. Control. Absolute. Undeniable. Irreversible. I leaned back in my chair. Exhaled slowly. And for the first time since that day in his office, I allowed myself to feel it. That quiet satisfaction. Not loud. Not explosive. Just complete. But the best part? He still didn't know. Not yet. "Ethan," Daniel said slowly, "when are you going to tell them?" I looked at the screen again. At the number. 51%. And then out the window. At the city. At the building where it all started. Where it all ended. And now. Where it all begins again. "Tomorrow," I said. Because tomorrow. There was a board meeting. An emergency one. Called because of the audit. Because of the falling stock. Because of the chaos. And they thought. They were gathering to save the company. They had no idea. They were about to meet their new owner. And him? The man who stood in front of everyone. And turned my life into a public humiliation? He was about to experience something far worse. Not just loss. Not just exposure. But the crushing realization that the man he tried to destroy now owned everything he had. The boardroom smelled like tension. You could feel it the second you walked in. Not just stress. Not just pressure. But fear. Real fear. The kind that sits in your chest and refuses to leave. Executives were already seated when I arrived. Voices low. Whispers cutting through the room like quiet warnings. No one was relaxed. No one was confident. Because for the first time in a long time, they didn't have control. And then he walked in. My former boss. Same expensive suit. Same posture. Same arrogant presence. But something was different. Subtle. Almost invisible. But I saw it instantly. His eyes. Tired. Restless. Like he hadn't slept in days. Good. That meant the pressure was working. He didn't notice me at first. Of course he didn't. Why would he? In his mind, I was gone. Finished. A mistake he already erased. I took a seat at the far end of the table. Quiet. Unnoticed. Exactly how I wanted it. The meeting started. Numbers. Reports. Excuses. Everyone trying to explain the damage. Trying to shift blame. Trying to survive. The audit has raised serious concerns, one of the board members said, adjusting his glasses. Concerns. That word again. Always soft. Always careful. Even when everything is burning. We need immediate restructuring, another added. Or we risk total collapse. Silence followed. Heavy. Unavoidable. And then he spoke. My boss. Leaning forward. Hands clasped. Voice controlled. We can handle this, he said. Confident. Too confident. Like someone trying to convince himself more than anyone else. This company has survived worse. I almost smiled. Worse? No. This was different. Because this time, the threat wasn't external. It was me. I've already put a recovery plan in motion, he continued. Cost reductions, asset restructuring. And moving money through fake vendors? The room froze. Every head turned. And for the first time, he looked at me. Really looked. Confusion hit first. Then recognition. And then something else. Something darker. You, he said slowly. Like he couldn't believe it. Like he was trying to process something impossible. I leaned forward slightly. Calm. Relaxed. In control. Miss me? I said. No one spoke. No one moved. Because they all felt it. That shift in the room. That moment when something changes. And nothing will ever be the same again. What are you doing here? He asked, his voice tighter now. Not angry. Not yet. Just uncertain. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached into my folder. Pulled out a document. And slid it across the table. Slowly. Deliberately. He stared at it. Didn't touch it at first. Like it might explode. Then finally, he picked it up. And that's when everything changed. I watched his face carefully. Because this was the moment. The exact second where truth replaces illusion. Confusion. Then realization. Then fear. Real, undeniable fear. That's not possible, he whispered. But it was. I think you'll find, I said calmly, that it is. The room erupted. Voices overlapping. Questions flying. What is this? Is this real? Majority shareholder? He slammed the paper down. No, he snapped. This is some kind of trick. I tilted my head slightly. Is it? I asked. Another document hit the table. Then another. Then another. Ownership records. Transaction histories. Legal confirmations. Everything. Clean. Undeniable. I own 51% of this company, I said. No emotion. No hesitation. Just fact. Silence. Complete. Crushing silence. And in that silence, you could hear it. Not a sound, but a realization. Spreading through the room. Power had shifted. Completely. This doesn't make sense, one board member said. It does, I replied. You just weren't looking. My boss stood up suddenly. Chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is fraud, he said. Desperate now. Grasping. You think you can just walk in here and... Careful, I interrupted. Soft. But sharp. Because now? I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to prove anything. The numbers already did that for me. You might want to sit down, I added. Before you say something that makes this worse. For a moment. It looked like he might explode. Like he might lose control completely. But then. He stopped. Because deep down. He knew. He slowly sat back down. But the confidence? The arrogance? Gone. Completely gone. Replaced by something else. Something much more satisfying. Helplessness. I'm calling for an immediate leadership review, I said, turning my attention to the rest of the board. And a full investigation into financial misconduct. No one argued. No one objected. Because they had already made their decision. Not because they trusted me. But because they no longer trusted him. And in business. That's all it takes. This meeting is adjourned, one of the senior members said quickly. Almost too quickly. Like he wanted to escape the situation. Chairs moved. People stood. Voices returned. But everything felt different now. Because one thing was clear. He was no longer in control. As everyone began to leave, he stayed seated. Frozen. Staring at the documents in front of him. I stood up slowly. Adjusted my jacket. And walked toward the door. But just before I reached it, I stopped. Turned slightly. Just enough so he could hear me. You said something to me once, I began quietly. He didn't look up. But I knew he was listening. Let this be a lesson. A pause. I let the silence sit there. Heavy. Intentional. Then I added. You were right. And with that, I walked out. No anger. No shouting. No drama. Just quiet. Complete. Victory. Because the truth is, the best kind of revenge isn't loud. It's when the person who tried to destroy you has to sit there and realize they built your success themselves. The news broke 3 days later. Not quietly. Not subtly. But like a storm that had been building for months. Finally crashing down all at once. Senior executive under investigation for financial misconduct. That was the headline. Cold. Professional. But behind those words? Chaos. I was in my new office when it happened. His office. Same desk. Same chair. Same view of the city he once ruled from. But everything felt different. Because now, it was mine. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Calls. Messages. Emails. Everyone suddenly remembered I existed. Everyone suddenly wanted to talk. Funny how that works. Daniel walked in without knocking. He didn't need to. At this point, he was the only person I trusted in that entire building. "It's everywhere," he said, holding up his phone. "They've got documents, transactions, even internal emails." I nodded slowly. "Good," I replied. But the truth? I already knew this was coming. Because once the audit started digging, it was only a matter of time. And he wasn't careful anymore. Pressure does that. It breaks people. Makes them sloppy. Desperate. "They're saying he could be arrested," Daniel added. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I looked out the window. At the same streets I walked months ago. After being thrown out like I meant nothing. Back then, I felt small. Powerless. Forgotten. Now, everything had flipped. Completely. "Ethan," Daniel said carefully, "you okay?" That question. Simple. But loaded. I thought about it for a second. Really thought about it. Because this was supposed to be the moment. The payoff. The satisfaction. The victory. And it was. But not in the way I expected. I thought it would feel different, I admitted quietly. Daniel frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I thought I'd feel happier," I said. "Or maybe relieved." He didn't interrupt. Didn't try to fix it. Just listened. "But honestly?" I continued. "It just feels quiet." And that was the truth. Because revenge isn't loud. It's not fireworks or dramatic music. It's silence. The kind that comes after everything is done. After the fight is over. After the outcome is decided. It's the moment where you realize you don't need to prove anything anymore. Because you already did. Later that afternoon, I saw him again. Not in the boardroom. Not in control. Not standing tall like he used to. But walking out of the building. Escorted. 2 investigators on either side. His posture different now. Shoulders lower. Steps slower. And his face. That was the part I'll never forget. Not anger. Not arrogance. Not even fear. Just emptiness. Like someone who finally understands that it's over. Completely. He looked up for a brief second. And our eyes met. Recognition hit instantly. And in that moment, everything we had been through, everything that happened, everything that led to this, it all existed in that single glance. No words. No confrontation. No final speech. Because none of it was needed anymore. He already knew. And I already won. Weeks passed. The investigation deepened. More details came out. More evidence surfaced. More damage revealed. The company stabilized under new leadership. Under my leadership. Not perfect. Not easy. But steady. Because unlike him, I wasn't trying to hide anything. I wasn't trying to manipulate numbers. I was building something real. Something that didn't need lies to survive. One evening, I stayed late. Alone in the office. The same office where it all changed. I sat at the desk. Leaning back slightly. letting the silence settle in. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to go back to that day. The humiliation, the anger, the moment everything fell apart. And I asked myself something simple. If that never happened, would I be here? The answer came instantly. No. Because sometimes, the worst moments in your life aren't endings. They're setups for something bigger, something better, something you couldn't see at the time. I stood up, walked toward the window, looked out at the city again. But this time, it felt different. Not distant, not cold, but clear. Because now I understood something I didn't before. Revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about rebuilding yourself so completely that their actions no longer define you. And in the end, that's exactly what I did. Outro CTA. If this story made you feel something, if you've ever been underestimated, disrespected, or pushed to your limit, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. What would you have done in my place? If someone publicly destroyed your reputation, would you choose revenge like this, or walk away forever? If someone publicly destroyed your reputation, would you choose revenge like this, or walk away forever?